When couples say their vows at the altar, through sickness and in health, you never really imagine that the sickness would come so soon. In today's episode, we interview married couple Aron and Merhawit, who were caught completely off guard when Merhawit was given a cancer diagnosis while she was pregnant and while Aron was in medical school.
The couple managed to find the silver lining in their adversity. They believe that experiencing adversity in life is crucial to our growth and development as humans, just like it is for lobsters.
Tune in to hear that analogy. Aron and Merhawit have a heartwarming perspective on the meaning of life after all that they've gone through.
We hope this episode resonates with you in one way or another. Thanks for tuning in.
Have you ever thought about your meaning of life?
What is our purpose here? You're listening to CatharSIS, a podcast about the meaning of life, created by two sisters who are in the field of marriage and family therapy.
Hello, my name is Michal.
And I'm Mayan.
This podcast was created in honor of our dad, who was a hematologist-oncologist, a medical doctor who would always ask everyone and anyone, what is the meaning of life?
It's a personal yet relatable podcast where we interview people and have discussions about the meaning of life, of course, as well as friendships, relationships, love, nostalgia, how to cope with an existential crisis, and normalizing grief and death.
We have the lovely couple, Merhawit and Aron, with us today on the show. I met these lovely people in medical school when I was in medical school for a little bit on an island, Dominica.
Wait, you were in medical school?
I know. Weird, right? But I did transition to the happy world of therapy, so it's all good. But I found the most incredible people while I was in medical school, including Merhawit and Aron.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having us on this amazing podcast.
So how are you feeling about finishing med school, this journey? You're going to be an MD soon.
Yeah, I mean, it honestly feels really surreal. It's been such a long journey that when you get towards the end, honestly, you don't really know how to feel because you've been in it for so long. So it's such a new feeling to feel when you're about to be done. You're just, oh, wow, like I've been in this kind of medical school phase forever. It feels like forever. And then all of a sudden you're about to be done. You're like, whoa, I don't know how to feel. But I mean, it's a great feeling and it's a scary feeling just because, you have, now you're moving on to actually working in the hospital. And, now you really have people's lives in your hands and you're responsible. So it's a great feeling, and then it's a scary feeling just to know, okay, now I'm no longer a student anymore. I'm actually going to be a doctor, but yeah, it feels great.
That's a big deal. Merhawit, what is it like for you to be wrapping up this stage of the medical school, the medical career journey?
We called this year the last push, a series of events that lead up to the residency portion of interviews and applications and things like that. I never thought we would get to this point. I never looked at our journey as, okay, this is where we're going to get to. It was always one step, whatever we can see in front of us is one exam after next exam. As you know, Michal, we're on island, just that one exam and then the next one. We never looked at we're going to graduate and, are you going to be doing this and that? It was always just, I think it's a good way to look at, this medical journey. It's a marathon. You want to slow the pace and just kind of go with the flow, and so much unpredictability that comes with it. And you just kind of pivot and move around. So the journey's been long and tiresome, but amazing. He's taken me on a great adventure. So it's been a huge learning experience as life is, So we've been very fortunate and grateful through the
How long
process.
have you guys been together for?
We've been together for 10 years, and we've been through undergrad together, decision to go abroad for medical school together. So it's just been one adventure after the next.
Did medical school or was there a significant event in your life through this journey that had an impact on your relationship? Or what was that like going through so much?
Absolutely. So many things. Especially, I think it all started once we got on the island. I think that was the biggest peaking point through our life because, we've just been friends, partners through undergrad and stuff. But once medical school started or us moving to a whole new island, and then we got married, and then all the series of events of growths on the island, being married, that was hard. And there's just so many lessons that we've learned through all of that, whether it's me learning to have my own path, in the midst of his path, and kind of like merging and not being self-centered, because it could get to a point where, what about me? The focus is all about you. Like learning to maneuver through that as partners, as friends foremost. Like we're friends first before anything else. So I think that really has solidified the way we have maneuvered through our journey of medical school or our marriage or our friendship. And we've learned a lot. And the last year it took us for a huge loop, with my diagnosis. So I think that was a huge, huge shift in our whole perspective in life and the meaning of life.
Can you say a little bit more about what it was like for you, Merhawit, and also for you, Aron, for you both to experience Merhawit's cancer diagnosis and everything that came along with that?
For me, when we first found out, it just really, just like anyone who finds out, it takes you by surprise. You're just going through life, and you're more focused on just the day-to-day things, and you're just working on like accomplishing things and doing things, and then all of a sudden this big thing happened, and all of a sudden our whole world just kind of just came to a pause, because it's one of those things you don't know what's going to happen. You actually don't know. It's a cancer diagnosis. There's so much, even when you talk to the doctors and anyone, they don't give you any, oh, hey, she's going to be great in a couple months, or hey, she's going to be fine, after we do this. They don't give you that information. And so you just feel so lost, like, what's going to happen? Like, what are we going to do? How do we, is this something that we can even heal or cure, or is what's going on? So you just feel so helpless, because even the doctors themselves, like, they just kind of give you that, they're like, oh, hey, we're just going to try our best, and see what happens. So you're just like, oh, what? You're not going to tell me like everything's going to be all good, like in a month, or, so that's the most helpless feeling.
And we can't blame them for that.
Yeah.
Right?
And then on top of that, it's so hard when you see someone that you like. Every single moment that I used to look at her, I used to be like, I just wish it was me going through it instead of her. It was so hard to see her going through it, especially because at that time she was pregnant, and I was just like, wow, for her to be going through this, I wish I could just take the pain away and just take some of that.
I remember, I think right when I first, just to kind of set up the timeline of, we just moved to New York. 3 months after being in New York is when I got my diagnosis. So I only went to get my blood work because I was pregnant. So I would have not gone to get any type of routine checkup if it wasn't for that. Yeah. So pre us moving to New York, while I was looking for apartments and kind of organizing his move from Florida over here, I was already having symptoms. I was already having such neck pains and just muscle tensions. And I was not aware of, obviously, you're not going to think, oh, this is the symptoms for cancer or whatever it might be. I just played it off. Like, oh, I just slept wrong, or I did something while we were moving, I just blamed it on myself. So I just kind of stuck through it, like, whatever, and get over this. Let me just pop some, over the counter medication. I'll be good. And it was on and off. But once I got pregnant, it got so much worse. So then I was like, well, this is not normal. But knowing me and how much I'm obsessed over maternal health and that whole field of medicine, I was like, oh, this is normal. People go through this. Like, women stick through pain. Like, we're good. Like, and I have a high tolerance and I don't really complain either. So we kind of just went through the motions of this is fine. But once we were forced to come in after my blood work, the huge thing that I remember is the midwife giving him the lab results and his face just completely changing. And I was like, that's weird. Like, why I've never seen that before with him. He's not an expressive he doesn't show stress or any type of issues on his face. But that was the first time in 10 years that I've seen him express such disdain. But not to make, the story long, but shortly after that, we were on our way to the emergency room and we had to go straight from the clinic to the hospital because they were waiting for us. And I was at peace. I was fine. I just said, oh, you know what? I hope the baby's fine. I wasn't even thinking about me at that point. I had not, as you should, of course, So all I said to him was, we'll be fine. Whatever this is, God will get us through it. I was just so calm. And he would look and be like, why are you calm? Why is your face so chill? He's freaking out while driving. I'm over here gagging, looking at the trees and being like, we good. We're going to be fine. Whatever this obstacle or this pain or this suffering is coming, we'll get through it. We have countless of times.
Would you attribute that only to your faith in God, or do you think there's something else?
Absolutely. And that's a huge part of our life. That's a huge part of our journey, because this wasn't the only obstacle. Like, the obstacle before this of living on the island and being, the first few years of marriage, it's challenging. There's a lot of things that we both learn about each other, and we might be one under God, as a married couple, but we're also individuals. We have our own individual goals, our individual paths. I have a purpose. He has a purpose. And then together we, solidify whatever that is. But absolutely, I think a huge part is our faith and the way we grew up. And that's a testament to our parents and how they raised us to handle these sorts of things. And God's grace at the end of the day. It's not just our own physical strength that we're able to get through anything. It's this power, this whatever it is, anyone can attest to. So yeah, absolutely.
Also, part of it's also just the fact that we have been through so much before that, whether we're on island or just dealing with a cancer diagnosis it's nothing compared to what you'll ever go through. People have no idea what a cancer diagnosis. They don't understand what it feels like until it affects them. You don't know, when I used to hear about people who I knew or through someone else who had friends who got that diagnosis or had someone close to them get it, I used to be like, wow, that must be really tough. But then when it happened to us, I realized oh my gosh, now I know. We had just it was at a moment in our relationship. We had gone through so much before that we had strengthened our relationship in such a way that we were like, hey, whatever you go through, whatever I go through, we're going to help each other get through this. So luckily we had come to a part we had grown so much through the years that it almost not to say prepared us, but it kind of helped us with it. And so definitely that helped as well, for sure.
Yeah, I think just off of a tangent on that, where life does prepare you. Whatever obstacle you go through, the next phase, that other obstacle that you just passed has prepared you to deal with the next one. And I totally agree with that, because every phase, it teaches you something to be more resilient and to change your character and the way you attack things. Absolutely. That's part of life, and that's for everyone, for sure.
What advice would you give to a cancer patient and their loved one or loved ones who maybe aren't, who don't have a belief in God or don't really have some kind of strong faith that they can lean on, that are struggling through this?
It's a really good question and a very hard one, because I thought about that. I thought about, if I didn't have this foundational manual or this book or this view of God, like, what would I have to hold on to? It's very hard for me to say, because it's going to be very biased, because that is all I know. That is what my foundation is, right? But I think you have to find the strength to keep to walk, like, just take a step, like, I think it doesn't matter what, like, it's not about you trying to run or trying to, like, grasp things to move on with, but I think it's just walk. You don't know what direction, you don't know what's to come next. I think just get up and walk, like, whether it's mentally or physically. I think that's what's gotten through for me. Like, I don't think anyone's advice or quotes or books or none of that did anything for me. For me, it was just a matter of, you know what? I just got to get through this day. Okay. The next day. I think that's what I tried to focus on, because nothing else, you're just numb. When you get this type of news or this type of circumstance or this types of adversity, you're just numb. Nothing else makes sense at all. Nothing anyone says, everything goes through one ear and out the other. Maybe by a chance, someone's quote or someone's action will give you hope. And I think whatever hope it is, big or small, just hold on to that and just try to get through each day. I would say is take it one day at a time.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing both of your guys' stories and being so vulnerable with us. I mean, I know you and Michal are friends, but thank you for also sharing with me as well and for our listeners. That is a lot to go through individually and as a couple. And it's interesting. I'm familiar. I went through some 12-step programs, and that's their biggest motto, one day at a time. All you can do is live for today. And the 12 steps are based on the belief of a higher power. But yeah, one day at a time, 1 hour at a time even. I feel like that's all we can do with such devastating news and such grief, such heartbreak, such like expectations being shattered. And it's hard to even take it further than that, because life is so uncertain, especially with a diagnosis like cancer. It's more uncertain than ever. And to create stability as humans, we look for something to lean on, and we look to find some certainty amidst the chaos. And
absolutely,
whether it's God, whether it's love, whether it's a relationship with someone who's here or not here, a belief is so helpful in just persevering. And I liked what you said, just keep walking, just keep going. Like, who knows what will happen? What does today bring?
Exactly.
Yeah. A lot of people, I mean, and one thing we noticed too was when we were in the hospital, and we were in the hospital for a long time, and you meet so many people who are, going through the same struggle, and you meet some people who have this, like they just have like a huge family and people visiting them every day to cheer them up. And then you have some people who don't really have anybody, but they're still so positive, and they still just find some way to cheer themselves up or to just enjoy their day without even having someone to visit them. And this, I think I was telling Mer this before, but it's amazing. But like, cancer patients are some of the most positive people I've ever met in my life. And I used to be like, how can you be so positive after just getting such a devastating diagnosis? And then I realized is that once you get it, something switches in you. You get this like switch. All of a sudden, you're not focused about, like this little thing or that little thing,
just
or
mundane
like the things that we normally worry about in our day. You're just focused about, okay, I want to enjoy today. Like, I want to live through today. And everyone that we met, that's all they cared about. It was just like, I just want to smile today. I just want to enjoy the day, whatever it is, even if it's just doing a crossword puzzle or talking with other people or just, going in the hallway and just chatting with the nurses. All they cared about was just enjoying their day.
Yeah, it was just one thing that really pops out for me is rejoicing in your suffering. So that was something that my friend said to me over and over again when I was during my transplant time. Things that until the transplant time didn't make sense. I was just numb to the world, just getting through the day or whatever it might be. But I always remember that because even in the pain, I always smiled through it. It never changed like my original personality, if that makes sense. Like, because of my pain, you can't see that I'm suffering inside. Like, you could never tell what I've gone through because it's a perspective, it's a choice, So, not necessarily, you shouldn't be happy through your pain. That's what I'm trying to say. But even in the suffering, I think there's always something we can find that we're grateful for. Whether it's us breathing, us being able to see, us being able to move our limbs. Like, yeah, it's tough, it's not fair, and it sucks in those moments. But I think always looking forward to something positive in anything, whatever circumstances we're in, I think that really changes your perspective. You have to make the choice to get out of that mindset and that default setting that we as humans tend to go to and dwell in the negative, but get yourself out of that place.
So would you say that getting a cancer diagnosis influenced some type of change or shift in your meaning of life?
Abso-freaking-lutely. It was, honestly, I wouldn't change anything. I know it's crazy to say that. The amount of ordeals and things that even to this day, I'm like, when is this going to end? Because even after you're done and you've survived a year or two, you're still going through the outcomes of, your body's just gotten this crazy beaten down. And I know, and you also don't realize what happens after that, but it absolutely changes everything. And we've had so many talks about that with you, McCall. And I also want to thank Macaulay over here, not just because you're in the field of therapy, but because as a friend, you asked all the questions that someone probably would never have the guts to ask me through this whole process. And it, not in a sense of doesn't have the guts. I think it's more out of operating out of fear as humans, not wanting to walk on eggshells and not wanting to replay certain painful memories. But I think it's important to go through those painful memories and reflect and, okay, this made me feel this way. Now, how do I change that into a positive outcome? Like, what is this adversity able to help me grow in? That's essentially the goal. Whatever pain and adversity and suffering you go through, you want to find the growth. It made you uncomfortable. Now, how do I change my perspective? And how does this help me become a better version of myself over time? So I really want to thank you, McCall, so much. We talk about this all the time with Aron. You were a constant, solid person through my healing process. I wouldn't have been able to do that. I would have probably started now to see therapy, if that makes sense. But in a weird way, you just played this magical role of my healing process, and I will forever be grateful.
Aww, Merhawit.
I can attest to that. Every time they talk to each other, I gets off of that conversation and she's like super happy. I'm like, oh man. I was like, that's nice.
And that helped us, with our questionings and our own therapy session, because I was able to release a lot of those things with you, McCall, and think about those things that I would have not asked myself either because I was scared. So that helped us also heal together.
Yeah, I'm definitely not good at asking those questions.
Well, men in general aren't. So.
Yeah.
Aron, what about for you? How or in what ways did witnessing Merhawit go through cancer, but also being someone who loves her and cares about her and being beside her during her cancer journey, how did that shift your meaning of life?
I mean, 1000%, because you think every day is promised to you right before that. You're just never prepared for that. And when it happens, everything just changes inside you. You start to be like, okay, this is the person that I was planning on spending the rest of my life with. Never in a day did you think, you're never thinking in your head, oh, maybe in a couple years, something like this might happen where one of our lives are going to be in jeopardy, or one of us is going to be really sick and we have to worry about life and death matters. But when it does happen, in one way, you're trying to be as positive as you can for the person. I wanted to be as positive as I can, because even though I was hurting and I was just questioning everything, I didn't want her to see that, because I already knew there was so much to worry about. I didn't want her to worry about me. So I remember there was times where, I don't know if I ever told you this, but if I ever felt like I needed to cry, I would never do it in front of her. I would go to another room, or I would just walk away and go somewhere else and just cry for a while by myself. And then I would do it, let it all out, and then go back to her with a smile, because I just didn't want. I knew she was already going through so much. For her to see what I was going through, I knew, it would just bring her even more down. So that was a tough part. And then the tough part was just seeing her go through all her treatments and seeing her hurting and seeing her, suffering, and just not being able to tell her it's all going to be good. Right after you do this treatment, everything's going to be fine. And being positive every single day, even through all the suffering, is really hard. It's just hard. But honestly, what helped me the most was, one, seeing how positive she was. There would be days where she was going through really tough treatments, and she would just be sitting there laughing and just enjoying the day, just making jokes as she's getting chemo and all this stuff. And that was one of the biggest things that helped me, was just seeing her smile. And then the other thing was having faith. And once I kind of let go of worrying about next week and if everything's going to be all right, like, it helped me so much, because then I wasn't just so preoccupied with that thought process. I was just more focused on, how do we get through today? What can I do with Mer that's going to make her smile today and get her through today's treatment? I appreciated every second that me and her had, and I appreciated every moment that we spent together. Every conversation that we had made me realize how special every single one of those things are.
I'm hearing for both of you that your meaning of life became more about enjoyment.
Oh, yeah.
Enjoying each other in a very enhanced way, in ways that you weren't before, enjoying each moment in ways that you weren't before, really enhancing your quality of life, just moment to moment.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Maximizing your time here on Earth. To refer back to something Mayani and I talked about, I think in our first episode, about what our dad used to tell us.
I also keep going back to the motto, healing happens in the context of relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And it seems like a lot of healing is happening for both of you, just being in your relationship with each other.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
It'll definitely, I don't know, maybe for some people it tests their relationship. For some people it might strengthen their relationship. I'm not sure. But most of the couples that we met, it really strengthened their relationship, way of making you closer to someone, and just seeing a part of them that you just never saw before and that you never really paid attention to until something like this happens,
Yeah, absolutely.
Do you think there's a way to realize all of this without going through such a life-altering event? Or do you think that life-altering event is necessary to experience?
I believe that we all need suffering. I know this is going to sound, to some people, it might be like crazy, or it might be, okay, that's a little extreme. Do we all need to suffer? But honestly, a state of adversity and being uncomfortable that's where you grow the most. If you're not uncomfortable, you're just going to stay in the same shell. There's an analogy by, I believe he's a rabbi, Dr. Abraham Tversky, I believe. He explained the analogy of a lobster and how it grows through its life from its infancy, where it's a mushy animal contained in a hard shell, in a rigid shell, right? So for it to grow over time, it has to shed its shell, right? And the times that it shed its shell is when it's gotten too tight, it's gotten too uncomfortable in that rigid shell. And so it hides itself in a rock from predators, and it sheds that shell and it grows a new one. So I think that explains pretty much life on Earth, where we're always shedding our shells and we're growing. And I think it's important to have those sufferings or the pain, whatever it might be. I'm not trying to say that everyone should suffer this great tragedy, but I think those adversities and those obstacles allow us to grow and to shed our shell and to gain a new one. Because how unfortunate is it to be in the same shell and uncomfortable? And what's the point of life? Like, if you're not going to change over time and have a new version of yourself in your lifespan, what tragedy is that for you to be the same person you came on this earth and you're just stagnant? Like, that's unfortunate. If nothing else, I think the process of self-growth and self-discovery and shedding our shelves is a huge thing. If nothing else, you don't have to be this successful person. You have to do these ridiculous social, societal norms that everyone expects you to be. But self-discovery and you growing as a person, your perspective and getting uncomfortable and moving forward, I think that's a huge success in life. Your mindset and your growth and your ability to see things and deal with things and be kind and respect others. I think that's the most important thing we can learn, on this earth. And this is not just because I had a cancer diagnosis. It's just a testament to when you reflect back, there've been many obstacles that I'm pretty sure you, Macaulay, and like you guys have gone through multiple stages and you have shed those shells and gained a new one after those obstacles,
I love that analogy. I never heard that before, the lobster analogy. And it's also like has a good name to it, the lobster analogy. I don't know.
It's very memorable. I heard it like a very long time ago, and it like stuck in my head. Like the way he explained it, it was literally like a 1-minute video, and it just stuck. I was like, oh my God, that's so true,
And I liked what you said about rejoice in the suffering and we grow in discomfort, and that it also speaks to the racial injustices of America right now and how people are uncomfortable and potentially that's a blockage for not wanting to change. But it's important to be uncomfortable because that is how we break out of that lobster shell and change.
Absolutely. Because the overall message of that whole thing is that if we use the adversity properly, you will get through that adversity. So you have to realize, okay, this is uncomfortable. This sucks. How do I use this? You have to use that adversity properly to propel you to grow and to change your perspective and to go on to the next uncomfortable situation and know how to deal with it.
I also think, though, it can, even if you're not going through it, a lot of like our parents and our friends didn't go through it, but it changed their lives too. And even though they didn't go, they weren't like in the hospital, like going through this, just them getting close to us and talking to us and like understanding what we're going through, it changed their lives, especially for my parents. Like my parents, like I noticed like a 180 in them. Like they actually learned things that I've been begging them to learn for like 20 plus years, and it finally clicked for them. And that's one thing, like if you do know someone that's going through a cancer diagnosis or whatever it is, just take the time to understand what they're going through, because it can really help you.
And
because
your outlook of life.
Yeah, you can really learn from it, and you can help that person too.
Yeah. So yeah, that is a good point. I don't want to say every single human person has to go through suffering to understand, but I think there's many levels of suffering. The actual person who's going through it, but then it's also the people that love you. So if you love someone and you care about someone, you're going to take that pain with you. You're going to project that pain. That was the hardest part for me. It wasn't my own pain. It was seeing the people I love have to see me go through this. That was more painful for me. It wasn't hard for me to go through my thing, yet to a certain extent. But the hardest part of all was seeing him having to see me, was seeing my friends be like hopeless. You're just stuck. They can't do anything for me. He can't do anything for me. Like, it was just everyone being at the mercy of, like, we just hope she makes it through this. So that is hard. Like, there's a layer of suffering where it's far removed just from the person, the people that love you, the people that care about you, even people that were absolute, even strangers. That it's that empathy, right? At the end of the day,
Yeah, man.
Like, empathy is so far removed. So there's levels to it. And even when I say strangers, is even when you read about someone's story, it changes you, right? So when my sister did the GoFundMe thing, that was another tier of strangers knowing about my story. And so that allowed them to connect to my story and feel the pain.
And just like you said, especially with like today's injustices, if we all just kind of take the time to understand other people's suffering, we can learn so much. Even if we're not suffering, like,
directly.
If you take the time to understand someone else's suffering, it can change your life.
Yeah. I find it so incredible about what you said earlier, that the real tragedy is remaining stagnant. And I think that applies to the cancer diagnosis that and the journey that you've been on with that, the obstacles that came before. I mean, hurricane, before hurricane, medical school. I mean, like everything that came before that. And even with what's going on in our society, and I mean, what's been going on in our society, really. So I just want to highlight that the real tragedy is remaining stagnant.
So this podcast is all about normalizing grief and normalizing death, and it's also about the meaning of life. How would you each define your own meaning of life?
I would say, for me, I don't think that there's one clear statement or phrase to define the meaning of life for me or for us. It's ever changing. It's always taking on a new title. Every chapter, every phase of our life, it's taking on a whole new meaning each time. It's had a different meaning when we were first dating. It's had a different meaning when we were in undergrad. It's had a different meaning when we moved to the island. It's had a different meaning when we've been married. And I think that's the beauty of it. I don't think there's one just quote to the meaning of life. I think it's, like I said, that lobster analogy. I guess I'll stick with that. It's the shedding of the shell. The meaning of life has been the shedding of our shells.
Beautiful. I love that.
For me, I feel like now when I think about the meaning of life, it's where your love is. It's what in your life your love is going towards. And I've realized if your love is going to things that shouldn't matter, or things that are not about love, that doesn't give you life. You're just kind of just walking around just like a zombie, you know what I mean? But then after this diagnosis and after going through a lot, when I focused my love in just us and our faith, I just felt I was so happy. And it changed, like I was looking at the world differently. My life was just simple. I just want to love the things and be loving, and that's it. So I think that's the meaning of life.
Yeah, he's right. I think it made everything simpler, for sure. It simplifies it in the sense where all the mundane things that you worry about, it's just None of that stuff is in our control. One thing that like woke me up to with the diagnosis, or just in general our journey, is we have no control over anyone else, especially like relationship. That's a huge part of our life on this earth, right? Many relationships, family dynamics, friendship dynamics, work dynamics, stranger neighbor dynamics. All of those are relationships, and we are born on this earth to have relationships. We can't do it alone. Nothing like controlling how people react or how people are. We have no control over that. All you have control over is yourself and how you react to those things. I think that's the biggest thing that I've learned, is how I have a choice of how I react. It's either like self-inflicting myself with worrying and holding grudges, or not forgiving people, or having attitude problems, or whatever it might be. Like, you learn over time to kind of make those decisions for yourself and make your meaning of life a lot more easier, because sometimes we cause all those things ourselves.
Absolutely. And I think that there is a lot of empowerment in saying to yourself, okay, obviously it wasn't my choice to have a cancer diagnosis, but I can make the choice in how I react and how I respond to this. So, for me, it's very inspiring to hear that no matter what you've been through, what you're going through, you're still able to tell yourself, well, this is how I want my experience to go. What advice this is for both of you. What advice would you give to the spouses of medical students or of doctors who, you are the spouse is sacrificing a lot of their time and energy too, as their partner goes through the medical school journey, and then there's going to be residency after that. Like, it's like there's exam after, so what would you say is the best piece of advice you can give to the spouses of medical students and doctors?
I think I learned this like after first semester, I would say, where like the first semester was a good, adjustment period, but it's you taking the time as a spouse, taking the time to make time. Like, I always knew that he had to eat, right? So I made sure that when he's eating, we're doing it together and we are spending our time together, because that's going to be the biggest factor that's going to cause many problems in a lot of, I feel like, spousal relationship, especially when it comes to medical or any rigorous program, is that I could get to a point where I'm self-centered and selfish and being like, well, he's not making the time for me, and you only care about your career path. This is all about you, because essentially the whole medical journey is focusing on him, right? So it's the season for him, for you as couples. That's the season that you are in, and embrace it. Whatever that year is, do what you got to do. Make the time, because as the wife, I have more time on my hands to control our happiness. It's either I have control over sinking our boat, not him. You know what I mean? So I will take that charge. I will figure out how to sail that boat, how to tie those sailor knots, how to, at the same time, drive the boat, how to predict the wind, meaning I know when his tough times are. I know when his exams are coming up. I know what topics not to talk about at those times. You're like this FBI agent, I would say, like in a funny like analogy, where I'm figuring out how to keep us afloat. Like, I'm in charge of that, So if I want him to spend time with me, I create those outlines during breakfast, lunch, dinner, and then I create our walks. So I make him do those things. So I kind of create those structures. So that would be my biggest advice is, you want to spend more time with your husband, create those opportunities to make the time, because he's not going to think that way at all. He is they're programmed to do one thing at a time, So I think I learned that really quickly, that I was in control over those time, because time is of the essence.
And if I had to give advice, the best advice I can give for that medical student is just understand how much your significant other is sacrificing, and understanding that your success has a lot to do with them just as much as it is you studying and doing well on exams. Because like if you're gonna just sit there and be like, okay, well, they're just like chilling and I'm the one taking all the exams, you're just shooting yourself in the foot. Because if you don't understand that that person is gonna help you get through this, then you don't understand the meaning of having them support you.
Yeah. I love hearing you value Merhawit and the support that she's given. And it's really beautiful. I really feel the love that's between you two. Well, thank you both so much for being on this show and talking to us. Of
course. We are so honored.
This was actually the first time we've openly talked about everything, like her cancer diagnosis. First time we've actually openly talked about it. So yeah.
How was it? How was that for you?
It made me think a lot about some things that I've actually not thought about at all. Yeah. Not at all, but just things I had just kind of inside that never really
I think you've made him, I think I've talked about it a lot more with McCall, but I think for you, I think it helped him, I think, reflect on a lot of things that even hearing him say some of the things he hadn't really vocalized it, he probably would have thought or has thought it, but I think saying it to you guys was kind of amazing to hear.
This was good.
This was a therapy session for Otto.
That is the best feedback you could give me and Mayan, because that's a main reason why we wanted this podcast to take off. We want to normalize everything that comes up in life. Absolutely. We want to call things out, talk about it.
Absolutely. So, thank you so much for giving us a space to speak on our life and our journey. We really appreciate it.
If our listeners want to reach you or they have questions, where can they reach you?
As of now, I think I would just say email. It would be my first initial, my first name, so the first letter M, and then my last name, gourmet33@gmail.com.
It's amazing that you guys have set up this platform to just help people like myself who don't really vocalize a lot of things that they feel at times. And this is therapy for sure. Yeah.
Would you say it was cathartic?
Yes.
In a world where I'm a drop in the ocean, an Israeli, American, whatever, in France, to be completely happy and satisfied in my environment, all I need is one friend. 2 friends, it's a luxury. Okay, the ultimate friend is the one you open up your soul to, the one you share with, the one who actually gives you the full reaffirmation that you thirst for. Okay, we all do that. Okay, we all have the thirst for reaffirmation.